It's the favorite debate of internet goers, and a question almost as old as the internet itself. How do you pronounce GIF? Everyone's got an opinion on how to say it. Is it a hard G, as in gift, or a soft G, as in gin? Few words in the English language spark a more passionate disagreement over pronunciation. The next closest word is probably data or data, with a long A or a short A, but that isn't nearly as contentious. The origin of the debate comes from the fact that The origin of the debate comes with the fact that that word is one of the rare English words that was written long before it was spoken aloud, and has always been more frequently written than spoken. So, when reading it, people came out with different interpretations of how the word should be said. And because internet users love to fight over everything, they frequently come into conflict over whose interpretation is correct. From the least educated amateur to the professional linguist, everyone seems to have a different idea on how to say if and why. 1,000 people have attempted to prove why one pronunciation is better than the other, and they've come up with 1,000 differing and largely unsatisfying explanations. So what's going on here? The roots of this whole debate are a lot more complicated and interesting than they first appear. It has to do with the way people view language as a whole. There are tons of reasons people use to justify their own pronunciation of if, but the way they approach their justifications usually stems from a severe misunderstanding of how language works. Let's outline the various reasonings that someone may use to explain the superiority of a particular pronunciation. First, hard G. The crux of most arguments assert that GIF with a hard G is more intuitive. While many English words use hard and soft Gs, the most common words by and large use a hard G. The word most similar to GIF, gift, uses a hard G. After all, if you want a soft sound, why not use the perfectly available letter J? This argument gets a further boost from the fact that to distinguish pronunciation in writing, you usually have to write it with a J, to specify saying it with a soft G, while specifying the hard G uses the traditional spelling. In addition, GIF stands for Graphics Interchange Format. Since graphics has a hard G sound, it follows that the G in the acronym should be hard as well. Many on this side of the debate like to snarkily point out that no one says giraffics.
As you can see by this graph,
Finally, simple will of the majority is on hard G's side. No poll contains exactly the same split, but hard G users consistently outnumber soft G users. Aaron Bazinet cataloged these arguments on howtoreallypronounceGIF.com, and they've been used countless times across the internet. As for the argument for soft G, there's a lot less concrete logical evidence on their side. First, there's the point that more total words in the English language use a soft G than a hard G. But many of these words are really obscure, and more words use a hard G when adjusted for frequency of use. Other than that, the only other solid evidence in favor of soft G is that the term's creator, Steve Wilhite, says it's correct. He invented the GIF file format in 1987, and promoted it with the slogan, "Choosy Moms Choose GIF," a play on the slogan of Jif Peanut Butter. Later, when he won a Webby award for it in 2013, he used his acceptance speech to announce, Jif Peanut Butter agrees with him, but they may be a bit biased. This, however, is a hard stance to get behind in earnest.
Well, the G stands for graphics. That's a hard G, so I say GIF.
What? The guy who invented it says it's GIF. I'm sorry, do you mean the guy or the Jai?
If it were a brand name, Wilhite's word might carry more weight. But GIF has evolved far past that, into a word with a place in the Oxford English Dictionary. It has more than outgrown Wilhite's authority. No one can truly own a word. And if we're discussing authority, the GIF collection website Giphy says that their name is pronounced with a hard G, which is super weird considering the name is an obvious play on the word Jiffy, but that's beside the point. And the Oxford English Dictionary says both are fine. In terms of quantity, the hard G has more to back it. The arguments for soft G are not nothing, though. Besides, much of the hard G arguments have compelling counter-arguments as well. For example, lots of acronyms use pronunciations that don't match the words within them. The U in scuba stands for underwater, with a short U, but nobody says scuba. Plus, there's one final point.
The good news? We finally have solid confirmation on how GIF is pronounced. The bad news.
The Old English word if, pronounced yif.
No!
Yes.
Yes!
This is the language equivalent of King Solomon suggesting cutting the baby in half.
So how did this happen? Why such disagreement? Some of the issues with GIF lie with its origins, namely that it was written long before it was spoken aloud. But other words have been invented in writing before. Chortle, first used in Lewis Carroll's poem Jabberwocky, comes to mind. Why doesn't chortle spark the same debate? It has to do with the letters and syllables they use. When we see a written word for the first time, we base our guess of how to pronounce it on words we already know. In chortle, we can intuit a reasonable way to say it from words like chore and turtle. Very few other possible interpretations of the phonetic characters come to mind. This is how human babies learn to talk. These instincts allow young children to intuit grammar rules from their parents, even when their parents' grammar is imperfect. With GIF, though, as we've established, there are several examples of similar-looking words that use both the hard and soft Gs. Yes, there are more that use a hard G, but not enough to help somebody reading GIF for the first time come to a definitive conclusion. Your knowledge of words that begin with a GI is essentially telling your brain to flip a coin. People who feel strongly about one pronunciation or the other can and do point to all the concrete and logical reasonings I listed earlier to explain their choice. However, the relevance of all of this relies on a major assumption, that the English language is inherently logical. That is not the case. If it were, the plural of foot would be foots, elephant would be spelled with an F, and there wouldn't be 900 exceptions to the I before E except after C rule. The fact that so many people insist that a particular pronunciation of GIF is correct because of a logical argument exposes the flawed perception that the average person has of language. This whole situation is a clear and obvious failure of prescriptivist language theory. Prescriptivist theory is the idea that all language can and should fit into neat little rules of grammar. And if you speak in a way that doesn't conform to those grammar rules, that speech is wrong and worse than proper speech. That teacher you had that always insists that you say, "May I go to the bathroom?" instead of "Can I go to the bathroom?" That's prescriptivism. But language isn't that nice and neat. It's full of stuff that defies easy classification, and it's constantly changing. The opposite of prescriptivism, descriptivism, is the idea that the only rules you need to follow are the ones imprinted in your mind and the minds of the people you talk to. Instead of basing your speech on textbook grammar, you should talk in whatever way that best communicates what you want to say. It's why I break tons of rules when I write these videos. It's not because I can't talk with perfect grammar. I do it on purpose because it makes my ideas easier to understand. We like to think that the rules of grammar descended from on high and declared that this is how things should be said, and that's why we say them the way we do. But it's really the other way around. The English language sprang up naturally as people interacted with each other over hundreds of years. The rules of grammar came later to try and categorize what was already there. Grammar rules are less like laws of physics and more like classification of species. Researchers group animals by shared characteristics and then make definitions like, a mammal is an animal that has hair and doesn't lay eggs. Then they come across a platypus that has hair and lays eggs, and they're like, Except in the English language, there are thousands of platypuses. Or is it platypi? Ultimately, the correct way to pronounce a word is rooted in whatever people decide is correct. And in a situation like this, where there is no strong consensus, there isn't any rule on the books that dictates whether one interpretation is wrong. The use of GIF rippled through written online communication and became a household term barely 2 decades after its invention. It existed only in written form, long enough to give individual readers the chance to decide on their own interpretations of how to say it. Most people didn't follow some kind of logical flowchart in their heads the first time they saw GIF written out. Their brains quickly and automatically decided which one they thought was right. English-speaking internet users, isolated in their own minds, read and made different decisions on how to pronounce GIF. Then, possibly months or years later, those individuals came across people who say GIF out loud in a different way than they do. I remember when it happened to me. I read it as soft G, and then later, someone tried to tell me it was supposed to be hard G. As evidence, I pulled up this meme, my life all in one GIF. It had to be a soft G, otherwise this pun wouldn't make sense. Then my world was rocked when they showed me this. Welcome to the internet, here is your GIF basket. This is where the fierce tribalism that we see in the online debates kicks in. See, language isn't logical, but it is emotional. Proper speech is a critical part of social engagement, and the mispronunciation of a word is a prime source of embarrassment.
Whose ever-shifting style and aesthetic made him a true architectural chameleon.
Professor, do you mean chameleon?
Betty, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced chameleon. So. Class dismissed. No homework for a while.
Rather than choosing to believe that their way is wrong and risking ridicule, most people would rather dig in on their initial instincts. If they use any of the above logical reasons for saying it the way they do, it is only as justification after the fact. This is the backfire effect in action. That's when being proved wrong makes you believe in your original idea more. The conflict that comes from these social and emotional reactions is made worse by the competitive culture of internet communication. We see this on full display on howtoreallypronounce.gif.com. When Badsinet claims that the hard G is the most natural, logical way to pronounce it. That's why when everybody comes across the word for the first time, they use a hard G. The latter statement is patently false, according to the anecdotal experiences of hundreds of internet users. Badsinet may believe that his position is one of pure logic, but in reality he's doubling down on his first gut instinct by assuming that everybody else thinks the same way that he does. The debate on how to say GIF is the perfect storm for this kind of disagreement. It's a word that originates and is most commonly used in writing, using a letter with two potential phonetic sounds, that experience an explosive spread over a short amount of time, almost exclusively in a setting that encourages vicious debate. The users of either pronunciation were really hard to rationalize their choice, some even digging into linguistics to find factual proof that they are correct. But these arguments ring hollow, because they were never the reason why anyone decided on a particular pronunciation to begin with. As the debate endlessly rages, its participants on both sides cling to the idea that the English language is structured, orderly, and deliberate. The only way for this debate to end is for the English-speaking world to understand that language is built on emotional decisions, and that our innate instincts of language won't allow one pronunciation to reign supreme. One thing we can all agree on, though, is that it's not pronounced yif.